Welcome back. Nice to have that little break, but even more exciting to have the next panel come up. But before we do, I just want to take a moment to recognize a couple of people in the room. But even before that, if you looked at your program, just to, for one moment, acknowledge all of the sponsors who are helping to make these couple of days possible. If you'll take a moment, just give them a big hand. There's lots of them, and we're very excited about that. So just for a moment, want to say there are some folks in the room who we want to acknowledge and recognize. I understand, but I haven't seen the consultant from the Assembly Education Committee, Debbie Look, is joining us today. Yay, over there. There you are. Thank you, Debbie. I didn't see you. Additionally, I am pleased to announce that the chair of the First Five California Commission is here. George Halverson is here and joining us. And last but certainly not least is our newest commissioner to First Five California, but also the co-founder and director of the Advancement Project, Molly Munger. So this next panel is going to spend some time with us talking about this shared vision for California's early care and education system. It's something that I think I'm even talking about in my sleep. But we're very excited to hear that conversation. It's my pleasure to introduce at this moment Ted Lempert, who is going to help facilitate that. Ted spent some time when I first got to know him, 2 terms actually, in the California State Assembly. He is the founder of EdVoice and currently the president of Children Now, and also on the K-12 side, he serves on the San Mateo County Board of Education. He works daily on all of the issues that we have been talking about this morning and many more. But most of all, I think, and importantly, Ted is committed to improving access and quality for all children, birth through grade 12, and having just helping to ensure that they have the quality education every child deserves. So with that, I am going to bring up Ted Lempert, who will introduce his panel. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Camille, for your friendship and your incredible leadership. I also need to thank the Advancement Project. 11 years of a water cooler. Camille and I have perfect attendance. I think a few others of you do as well. And I'm looking at the amazing Molly Munger, thinking back when this was just a brilliant brainstorm, and now look at it. I mean, this is just incredible, getting better every single year. And speaking of getting better every year, I want to thank all of you in the early childhood field, because we've come a long way and matured a lot. When I first got to Children Now, my former colleagues in the legislature would say, oh yeah, this early childhood group came and talked to me. And then the legislator would say, well, that's interesting, another group had just come in right before you. And then the early childhood group would say, no, no, don't listen to them. They're wrong. Don't listen to them. Listen to us. Compare that with where we've been the last few years. This field has understood now Rule 1 of advocacy in politics, that you keep the base together or else you lose. And so what we've been able to do collectively, business and labor, providers, First Five, community groups, parent groups, child care advocates, preschool, TK, everyone coming together. We worked together, compromised with our legislative champions, came up with an ask, and then we've gotten some significant wins over the last few years with a less than supportive governor. But that was then. We're in a different time now, and part of what a mature field needs to do is adjust to where we are. And we are on the cusp, hopefully, of a governor who we don't need to convince on the value of early childhood, but rather a governor who could very well be committed to making California the national leader in early childhood, including in our prenatal and infant toddler years. And so our field, yes. And so our field needs to adjust that, and that's why this next panel is so key. Because different from the past, we should not be negotiating with ourselves and lowering down an ask so we can get it through. This is the time to think big, and that's what these different efforts we're going to hear from are doing. Have the research, have the numbers, have the facts, but then provide that to support the governor, a governor who, making this a top priority, can help resolve whatever differences, small differences we have among ourselves, but then more importantly, take this issue and put it past all the other interests so we can finally do right for our families, our kids, and the future of this state. So these panel members represent a whole lot of amazing efforts: Blue Ribbon Commission, Getting Down to Facts, there's a whole Poverty Commission, think tanks, lots of great efforts. You're going to hear from the national leader of First Five, great researchers, business, provider leader. But what all these efforts are doing is really providing a huge vision as we go forward. So to moderate this panel is someone who exemplifies what I've been talking about. Pete Weldy, who's Public Policy Officer, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, has been leading an effort to make early childhood the top priority in the gubernatorial campaign. I think it's been incredibly successful. Many of you watched that debate in San Jose. I was there, and when one candidate was speaking eloquently about early childhood, Delane Easton, all the other candidates, and you could see this in person, were all nodding. It was the only issue where almost all the other candidates were like, yes, yes, yes. So the Choose Children effort has been incredibly successful, really rallying folks around a high-level vision for early childhood and lots of grassroots efforts throughout the state. Pete is a relatively newcomer to this California. He did his best to rein in Mike Pence when he was in Indiana, but Pete is a quick learner, and he has now really established himself in the Silicon Valley Community Foundation as one of our great leaders in early childhood. So with no further ado, the moderator of this panel, Pete Weldy.
All right. Thank you, Ted, very, very much. I'm going to go ahead and call up the other panelists to come up. They will introduce themselves one by one, so come on up. You can sit in whatever order you'd like. I want to thank Ted very much for those kind comments. Yeah, I wasn't so successful in reining in Mike Pence, unfortunately.
I'm last.
Which you know,
Hey, how are you, Bruce?
why I'm in California. So
We
anyway, I also wanted to thank Camille as well for your leadership and strength and being a champion every day. And to the, yes. And to the Advancement Project, who have literally set this stage for this important conversation. So I'm going to almost sit down, but I did want to say a couple quick things. First of all, I'm really honored and humbled to be a part of this rock star panel. I am for sure unqualified to be here, and I don't have nearly enough initials behind my name. But this panel really represents the nation's leaders, honestly, in early childhood. They're the biggest brains. They're the biggest, in some cases, resource and referral agency in the state, the biggest funder of early childhood programs in the nation, the second largest chamber of commerce in the nation. These are heavy hitters. And our kind of theory here is that if we all speak with one voice to a friendly governor, we will be successful in achieving more for young kids. Really, and I was trying to think, what are the big things that we all have in common? And I think that there are really essentially three things, and we'll discuss them in greater detail here in just a second. I think the first thing that we have in common is that we believe the research. The research is so clear how important the early years are for a child's development, but also for families who are struggling to pay for expensive childcare in the state. We know that it can help solve poverty. We know that it can help close the achievement gap. The research is clear. We all share that in common. What we also share in common, I think, is that the state has not done enough. We've never had a really particularly friendly governor who's been an advocate for this issue. Never, not just Jerry Brown, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, Gray Davis, Pete Wilson, Ronald Reagan, George Deukmejian, you can name them. We've never had a true champion, and knock on wood, we're about to get one. And I'm really, really excited for that opportunity. But we need to be ready too, because we can't squander the opportunity either. We have to rally around a common vision, which is what we're trying to do as part of the Choose Children campaign to make sure the next governor of California is a true champion for young kids. And the third thing, obviously, that we all align on is that there is this opportunity, as Ted said, to really influence the next governor, to make sure they are a big champion. So without further ado, I will sit down now, and I will go and introduce the panelists, and we'll get some into the nitty-gritty of maybe what we want in 8 to 10 to 20 years, but also potentially how we can get there. So I'm joined by, like I said, a rock star panel, and we're gonna go kind of one by one, 5 minutes apiece, to talk about some of the different tables and policy discussions that everyone has convened, some of the great thinking that's happening, and then eventually where we find alignment between all of the different efforts. So honestly, I'll just go ahead and turn it right over to Michael Olenick, who's the Dr. Michael Olenick, who's the CEO of the Child Care Resource Center in a big part of California, San Fernando Valley and all of San Bernardino County. But hand over to you, Michael.
Thanks. So I was going to start by talking a little bit about the Child Care Resource Center, just so you know where I'm coming from. I've been the president and CEO for coming up on 15 years. And during that period of time, we've tripled the size of the agency. We now serve about 50,000 children and families in a 22,500 square mile area that takes in northern Los Angeles County and almost all of San Bernardino County. So I was interested to see John Kim's dots up there, and we got the low dots, so that's kind of interesting. We manage all the child care subsidy programs, stage 1, 2, 3, the alternative payment program, family child care, home education networks, and we make about 26,000 payments to providers each month. We coach and mentor child care providers in centers and homes. We are a support system for family, friends, and neighbors that are taking care of mostly babies. We're a Head Start center-based program for 3 to 5-year-olds. We also do the home partnership programs and early Head Start, meaning that we're working with a lot of community providers to improve the quality of their care in the community. We do home visiting for high-risk families. Thank you both, California, First 5 LA, and the coaching and mentoring. Thank you both First 5 LA, First 5 San Bernardino, and First 5 California. And then we manage the Child Care Bridge, which is the child care for child welfare resource families that was passed as a state bill. We started off with a pilot 2 years ago, turned it into a state bill, and now foster parents all throughout the state of California can get child care when they take a child, which is a really big deal for us. So somewhere along the line, I became one of the 9 community commissioners for the Blue Ribbon Commission on Early Childhood Education. I always have to think, because I'm on several of these things, and they all have different names, which is, talk about one of our problems. The Blue Ribbon Commission, and there are a couple of commissioners in the room, so I told them not to throw things at me if I get something incomplete, one of them sitting right next to me. It's a unique construction. There are 9 community members, people from the field, all different walks in the field, and all incredibly committed to the field of early childhood and passionate about making everything better and more streamlined, and none of them are quiet. We also have 5 elected officials who are on the commission, which makes for a really unique experience for all of us. And it's also a unique opportunity because this is going to be the plan that goes from the assembly and goes to the governor at some point. So it's a pretty complicated system that we're looking at, as many of you know. And one of the things I think that we have discovered over time is that every county is different. Saw that this morning. There's no one solution that's going to solve all the problems. There's no silver bullet. And the issues are different if you're in an urban environment, a suburban environment, or a rural environment. So we have 4 committees that are looking at all aspects of the 0 to 5 landscape. And when I say all aspects, it goes everywhere from family leave to home visiting to preschool, TK, ETK, California State Preschool. I mean, you name it, the subsidy system, we're looking at all of that. We've had hearings around the state. We have one coming up a week from tomorrow in Long Beach. We have reviewed hundreds of documents that have been written about ways that things could be done better, going back 25, 30 years, some of these documents, and it's amazing how accurate they are in terms of they're the same things that we're looking at now. We've surveyed organizations around the state around the issue of access. We've conducted focus groups with parents, and we've had a lot of meetings with key informants, including 2 former administrators of early childhood systems, one in Connecticut and one in Georgia. So right now, we are about 6 weeks away from drafting our recommendations. So I can't give you anything really concrete, but I can tell you that some of the concepts that we have resonated with are, and you heard this earlier, stop, and I'm not just getting to that, Araceli. It's the importance of the earliest years in brain development. We're looking at the concept of equity, not equality, targeted universalism, rather than making something available to all, targeting those who need it most. Care needs to be more affordable. There needs to be continuous quality improvement for all parts of the system, including family, friend, and neighbor care, family child care, and center-based care. The early childhood system is incredibly underfunded. We have questions about the structure of the system, and we have to address the needs of families for full day, not school day, full year, and non-traditional hours. And how do we track children's experiences? So I'll stop there. The whole issue is how do you pay for it? And how do you phase in and sequence?
Sonia?
So I'm Sonia Campos Rivera, and I'm with the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. Is my mic on, by the way?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I serve as the Director of Education Policy and Public Affairs at the Chamber, and the Chamber is a regional chamber, countywide, where a nonprofit, a lot of folks don't realize that chambers are actually nonprofits, and not necessarily tied to the U.S. Chamber, Cal Chamber, or even any other sister chambers. We do consider ourselves just sister chambers across the region and across the country. So the LA Chamber of Commerce represents about 1,600 chamber members across LA County, and we focus on a variety of issues that are important to the business community. It ranges from healthcare, transportation, water, and of course, education and workforce. And the chamber, up until probably 15 years ago, was pretty light on education issues and focused, as you would imagine, primarily on higher education and workforce. And luckily that changed about maybe 10 years ago, where we saw the importance of connecting early childhood education to K-12 to higher ed and workforce. If we wanted to ensure that we had a skilled 21st century workforce, our partners and data showed us that we needed to start in the early years. So my task about 10 years ago was to convince business leaders of the importance of early childhood education. No easy task, but I like to think that at this point, most chamber members, if you were to ask them about the importance of early ed, that they could say, yes, it is important and we need to invest in early childhood education and support policies that expand access to quality early ed. So at this point, we just really have fallen in love with the work. And I think part of the commitment that we have is, and that we've seen, is the importance of collaboration. Collaboration, not only within the business community, but folks that are on the ground doing the great work and understanding how to develop our own business voice. So in that time, we've done a whole lot of work. We really focus on developing relationships with partners and really informing state legislators and members of the administration of areas that we really need to focus on. So we talked about quality early education. We've talked about the importance of improving our workforce, our early ed providers, our child care folks that are on the ground caring for our young learners. We talk about many of these folks being brain architects and being the foundation to our youngest learners, but yet we all know, I don't have to tell anybody in this room, the major issues that we have around compensation, for example. So a lot of work that I feel the LA Chamber of Commerce is committed to, and again, supporting really other chambers across the region to do the same, and even across the country. There's about 1,300 chambers across the country that we're really trying to feed them the information of early ed. So in that time, the LA Chamber of Commerce was asked to be part of the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Task Force. You could just imagine how exciting this work is. This is a result of AB 1520 from Assemblymember Autumn Burke that was chaptered into state law last year. And we're tasked with the huge responsibility of developing recommendations on how to lift children and families out of poverty. And we're talking about deep poverty issues. So we developed 6 subcommittees. They range from housing and homelessness, early learning. We've talked about workforce and training, which is important. Special populations is another area. Social safety nets and coordinated services. The focus here is a coordinated approach, a comprehensive approach. If we have an amazing quality early ed system, but we lack housing issues, there's going to be a huge gap there. So we're tasked to develop these recommendations, and these are going to be public in the next couple of weeks, actually. So we're working really hard to finalize those, and again, not perfect, but because they're focused from cradle to career and looking at the approach of a holistic approach, we're confident that it's going to be, they're going to provide some good recommendations for the new administration and our current legislators.
I'm Debra Sky Peck. I'm a professor at Stanford Graduate School of Education. I have, for the last year and a half, been working on a report called Getting Down to Facts, which you're going to be hearing more about this afternoon. The comprehensive report, deeply and broadly at the state of education in California, pre-K through actually even beyond 12th grade. There are 36 reports. One of them focuses on early childhood education, but it is divided into a number of chapters that focus on various areas and needs. Because I only have 5 minutes, I'm just, instead of talking really fast so that you won't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to refer you to gettingdowntofacts.com, which has all of the reports, including the early childhood education one, so you can get far more details than I'm going to be able to share. I'm going to give you a few highlights from the findings of that report focused on early childhood education. And I've been asked to specifically comment on findings that directly relate to issues of looking at pre-K and 3 coherence, looking at how we create a seamless educational experience for children from preschool into the early grades of elementary school. The particular challenges that I'm going to describe are ones that are known well to the people in the field of early childhood education. I'm hoping that the detail, the examples of some of the solutions that have been found in other states and even in counties and places within California can be used to help guide efforts to try to address some of the challenges that I'm going to share. One of the findings in this report that is noteworthy and probably will be repeated this afternoon and has really pointed to early childhood education as a very important issue in California is that the achievement gap that we have in California is larger than in most other states if you look at children in K-12. But the reason for that relatively large achievement gap is not that children learn less in California than they learn in other states, but that they come to kindergarten less prepared. So it really shines a light on the need to ensure that children have the opportunities to be well prepared for kindergarten. Here are some of the challenges, and I expect to see a lot of head nodding as I go through these. One is we have an incredibly complex array of programs, funding sources, funding levels, and regulations. This is really a challenge, not just for programs that have to, individual programs that serve children and families that have to braid across all of these different funding sources and the regulations that go with them, but districts that are trying to expand access to pre-K have to somehow figure out how to navigate these hugely differing organizational structures. California has relatively low standards for licensing. Not only does it have relatively low standards, but it also has incredibly variable standards. So any given 4-year-old might be in a license exempt care, that's a program with that even though subsidized has no licensing requirements, or they may be in a program that's under Title II standards, or in a program under Title V standards, or Title I, or K-12 standards and regulations. The biggest problem I see related to our low standards is training. We have extraordinarily low standards for preparation for people who are going into the field of early childhood education. The quality improvement strategies that we use in California need a lot of work. QRIS system is not statewide. It needs some adjustments. The information isn't available to many families. And some of the quality improvement strategies are not as effective, at least according to research, as we might be. You will hear that we have a significant unmet need in California for care, especially for infants and toddlers. And as Mike mentioned, hours are not necessarily supportive of parents who want to work. The living wage, I just want to give you one fact related to the wages of people in early childhood education. 58% of child care providers qualify for public assistance in California. And just to finish, I want to reiterate, we have serious problems with a lack of data. It is impossible in California to determine accurately the qualifications and characteristics of the people caring for children, where California young children receive care, how many are enrolled in more than one program, or whether children are on track to succeed. So we desperately need a better system for creating a database that can guide the policies that we'll be working on to address the challenges that I've described. Here.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Fuller. It's really fun to see old friends like Molly and Camille and Lane Easton in the front row. These lights are so bright I actually can't see anybody else. I was also thinking, Pete mentioned the rock star metaphor, that I've been at this for so long that the rock stars that I adore, they're only available in these plastic things that are about this big. I'm facilitating something called the Berkeley Early Childhood Think Tank, and thanks to a couple of generous donors, in addition to supporting Debra's effort at getting down to facts, they're supporting a panel of about 15 of us to add analysis to this conversation about how do we build a united voice around early childhood education. The question, of course, is once we have that united voice and once we can get together around the table, what do we have to say and what are strong arguments for advancing the cause with a new governor and a fresh legislature and hopefully a new superintendent of public instruction? I just wanted to highlight 4 major themes that are advising or kind of guiding the work of the think tank. Most of the members are in this room, so we could have a meeting later this afternoon, perhaps. But I wanted to highlight thinking big and long term. I wanted to highlight balancing how we think about the total lifespan from prenatal care to age 4 or 5. I wanted to just briefly say something about stable funding sources. And then finally, the role of evidence and analysis and what we have to say to a new governor in the first 100 days or so. First of all, the Berkeley think tank and the panel itself has spent a lot of time trying to think long term, trying to lay out North Stars, as we often call them, trying to think about how we build a comprehensive system rather than kind of nickel and diming it year to year. You know, usually across the way in the Capitol, we try to crank up reimbursement rates, or we tweak TK, or we add a little bit of home visiting. We're really trying to think big and long term to have a system that provides balanced supports from prenatal all the way to the UPK. We're trying to focus on access to high quality programs and not trade off access against improving quality. And we're trying to think about how might we sequence growing the system out over the next 5 to 10 years. I think we are going to enter a critical period around mid-November when the governor's going to be scrambling around with his policy people to think through what's going to be in the governor's budget. I know Pete's thinking a lot about this. Other groups are thinking about this. But then we're going to have about 6 months through mid-May and the May revise in the budget to kind of work out the details. So I think it's going to be a 2-step dance. We're going to have to get together as a community, as a field, to get sort of the bullets right and think about long-term goals and North Stars, but pretty quickly say this is what we're going to do in the first year, this is what we want to do in the second year. And hopefully the economy will keep pumping along despite the economic policies of our president. The other point is how we find stable revenue sources for the field. The think tank panel itself has been looking a lot at Prop 98. I think as a field we have to build stronger bridges to the K-12 world. The talk by the Vice President of the CTA this morning I thought was inspiring. The teacher unions have, I would say, come around on the issue of early childhood and on the issue of family poverty in the last 10 years, and that's very encouraging. But we've got to keep that cooperation going with the K-12 interest groups as we try to cooperate in stabilizing funding from Prop 98, perhaps to expand TK down to all 4-year-olds or expand it down to all poor 4-year-olds from poor families. To stabilize that funding, we have to have strong allies in the K-12 world, and I do think the labor movement, including the SEIU, which was on the vanguard of this 10 years ago, I think those are going to be important partners. And finally, let me just say that I think we have to be tough-headed about this. Analysis and research, as Debra just mentioned, is key. We can't just float half-baked ideas and expect them to survive a discerning legislature or a discerning Department of Finance. We've got to think about this carefully. You might have seen the first brief out of the think tank that came at the end of the summer, where we looked at enrollment rates and also the distribution of pre-K enrollments and infant toddler support around the state. Almost 2/3 of all 4-year-olds in California now attend a pre-K center. We're not that far away from universal access. We have a long way to go in terms of quality, but we've got to think about how we can do this in terms of access, and that we can do it. It is affordable. That would not cost a lot of money to provide universal access to all 4-year-olds in this state. On the other hand, it's currently maldistributed around the state. We've got pretty strong enrollment rates in San Francisco, as you probably know, even in LA County, Orange County, San Diego County. But in the Central Valley, we have very low enrollment rates. We have a system that tends to reinforce that through a contracting structure, which is pretty set in place. So my point is, we have to have tough-headed analysis as we go forward, because we don't want to just expand the current system. We want to try to look at some of these distributional issues. The other point I'll leave you with is there is a lot of support for paid family leave. We just liberalized benefits in January. Paid family leave, however, is very regressively funded. Wealthy Californians put almost nothing into the disability insurance pool, and very few poor families benefit from paid family leave. So again, as we go forward, we've got to build consensus, we've got to build a united voice, but we've got to think about this in a tough-headed manner, especially, as Debra was saying, especially if early childhood is going to close these gross disparities by age 5.
Chris? Thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Ringwald with Advancement Project. Probably doesn't need an introduction, but we help put things like water coolers together that hopefully gets experts and community members in the room to make change as we'd like. You may recognize me from the check-in table earlier. So if you have the dietary restriction tags I gave you, be prepared. Lunch is after this. So be ready. I'm here to talk about some research we've done with the California Child Care Coordinators Association. There's 4 C's and an A there, so I'm glad I got that right. They have local planning councils, or LPCs, but I'm going to try and spell it out for the group. For those of you not familiar with local planning councils, they help plan child care services for counties across the state, cover the 58 counties, and they have to do a lot of work. A lot of the folks have 3 jobs or 4 hats, or however they need to be counted, but do great work. The state requires them to do a number of things, have needs assessments for their counties on the child care needs at least every 5 years, and then develop plans on how to meet or address those needs at least every 5 years. And then annually they have to make zip code priority lists, or basically make calculations of what zip codes should get additional or at least prioritized funding and resources based on the high numbers of unserved kids, high numbers and high percentages of unserved kids in their zip codes. So we were very thrilled to work with them to help these people with 3 jobs and 4 hats do things more efficiently, and take a little time to do some more advocacy on both their behalf and on the behalf of kids across California. So I think you're seeing a map on the screen, and that's the first of our 3 things. We wanted to give them kind of data and mapping pieces for part of a larger statewide advocacy initiative, give the 58 counties one voice to be able to speak together with maps that they agree on and data they agree on, and so forth, which is hard if you ever tried to wrangle 58 of anything. Getting people to agree on things can be a challenge, but we're glad they did it. The map you're seeing is basically looking at the number of kids that are, well, starting with infant toddlers, the number of infant toddlers that are eligible, or at least income eligible for state subsidized services. So there's lots of eligibility criteria, but we're looking at, percentages of infant toddlers that are at least income eligible, and you're seeing kind of from light to dark brown, cut into quintiles, the brown, kind of you're seeing a pattern of Central Valley counties being like Fresno, have high percentages of income eligible infant toddlers. If we were looking at high numbers of income toddlers, Los Angeles County would jump to the top of the list and be a little bit different looking map, but you get the idea. So the headline message here is basically about half of our babies and toddlers are income eligible for state subsidized services. And so the next, I have the clickers. The big green button on the next slide is showing then of those low-income kids who are eligible for state subsidized services, how many are getting served. So basically 5% or less than 10% if we're factoring in margins of error. So if we're combining these two maps, our advocacy messages, 50% of our kids are low income and we're serving less than 10% of them. So that's pretty rough right now. As a state, we need to be doing better for our highest need, our low-income kids. And so we're hoping that these counties can bring these advocacy messages forward in their words. So we've given them a template to create these maps and advocacy messages themselves, so they don't have to come to us, and that they're self-sufficient and more efficient on their data work, because some of these folks are policy folks that, quite frankly, when I start talking to them about Excel or GIS or different things, they start getting mad at me and just say, give me the thing and get out of the room, So, we've kind of done kind of a demonstration workshop to kind of teach them how to do this on their own, so they feel a little more comfortable with it and say, okay, I'm glad to put this map together, I'm glad to calculate this data and make my own advocacy messages, which quite frankly will be better if the counties are doing it themselves and say, I'm doing it. The preschool maps look very similar. So we're seeing income eligibility. Again, the Central Valley and then some northern Sierra counties coming up with high percentages of income eligible kids for state subsidized care. And thanks to a lot of, the patterns are the same for preschoolers, though thanks to a lot of the advocates in the room, the numbers are not quite so dire for preschoolers. Only about a third are served instead of, say, sub 10%. But either way, for babies and toddlers, for preschoolers, we're not doing enough. We need to do more, and that's why we're thrilled to be meeting experts and community members today to talk about ways to do just that. So I'll leave by saying we also put together some policy recommendations, and we really appreciate the work of 5 counties that stood together to kind of run this pilot program and then put it together with all the rest of the 58 counties. And those counties were Fresno County, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Santa Clara, and San Luis Obispo. So if you know folks on your local planning councils, especially in those counties, please thank them for me and their work. And I'll stop there.
Yay. So I'm, good morning still. I'm Kim Balche. I'm Executive Director of First 5 Los Angeles, and I'm delighted to be a part of the speed dating platform.
That's what it feels like.
And it's terrific to know that there's so many people here from different First 5s. We are part of those, the wrangling of 58 separate county commission CATs, along with the Association of First 5s and First 5 California. Our aspiration at our organization, as Kim Patel-Bronson said earlier, is that every child in LA County enter kindergarten ready to succeed in school and life. It's an aspiration broadly shared across the 58 counties in different ways. And it's because of that aspiration that the Getting Down to Facts study was so sobering, but also really motivating, because the report draws attention to what First 5 LA and the county commissions and really the broader family of First 5s know to be true, which is if we want to make progress in improving child readiness and success for school and life, then we need to recognize there's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle. And access to quality early learning is just one important, but just one piece of that larger puzzle. So a couple things I want to emphasize as a part of my remarks, with that by way of prelude, and that is, first and foremost, if we are going to close the gap in educational opportunity, and I purposefully frame it as a gap in educational opportunity rather than an achievement gap, then we absolutely need to bring a whole child perspective and a whole child agenda to this effort. So there are 2 pieces of the puzzle that First 5s are working on that I want to point out. Number 1, it's to recognize and strengthen the role of parents. Parents and their role as a child's first teacher. So we know learning begins at birth.
Before birth. So if we know learning begins before birth, at home, and with parents, then we have got to put parents squarely at the center point of our work. And that's where these evidence-based family strengthening programs are so important. And that's why you see First Fives across the state, and now increasingly in Sacramento, leading, advocating for universal access to evidence-based home visiting services, which the research tells us are going to improve family functioning, going to improve maternal and child health, and are going to improve kindergarten readiness. And it's great to see some general fund invested through the CalWORKs program this year. Yay, a lot more work to be done. Number two, we need to ensure the healthy development of child. Again, getting down to facts tells us kids are already starting behind, and kids are already, who are coming to kindergarten, already are experiencing delays. Roughly 70% of kids who enter kindergarten, that's when the delay is being identified. So that impedes their readiness for school. It impedes their potential for learning. That's why we see First Fives really being very aggressive across our counties, and again, increasingly statewide, and really participating in and often leading the charge for early identification and intervention systems, such as Help Me Grow, which are intended to help parents and help providers alike to ensure kids are getting the screens they need at the right time and getting connected to appropriate services. It's also why First Five LA and the association co-sponsored AB 11 along with Children Now. Governor vetoed that bill, but the bill is about accountability of health plans and DHCS and ensuring kids get those services for which they're covered. So it's great to see the child health and the family strengthening coming up more and more in these EC tables and conversations. I really want to encourage us all to take a broader early childhood development frame, because I frankly worry that when we focus on early learning or early care and education, it can be unintentionally reinforcing of silos and can unintentionally overlook the critical role that parents, family strengthening, and child health play. Number two, we need better data. As was said, we need better data to measure kindergarten readiness. Getting down to facts notes that we don't know that much about kids before they enter kindergarten. So we need data, and we need a measurement that adequately captures all the different factors that influence a child's ability to arrive at school and be successful. Here again, First Fives are doing a lot of really good work. There's a lot of kindergarten readiness assessments underway. LA is slowly moving in this direction, but excited to see the development and the momentum. We think the KRA experiences that we see around the state are a really good example of how data can inform and drive policymaking and can help align the early learning and the K-12 systems, which is so critical. We can also learn from other states. In the state of Oregon, you know what they've done? Their Medicaid program has included kindergarten readiness as a success metric. Think about that. Think about that. So their Medicaid program is acknowledging the role of child health, the role of health providers and health systems play in ensuring kids are ready for school. Final point I want to make is about this moment in time and the role of the water cooler and everyone here. The water cooler is about offering up concrete, innovative solutions and driving for change. And we're doing so now together in the context of a transition. I have had an opportunity to work on 3 transitions. They are so fun. They are really fun. They're an extraordinary window of opportunity to make a difference. And right now, the Brown administration departments and agencies are all busily writing briefing books for whatever administration comes in next. They're going to deliver them the day after the election. I'm not sure if there's any agency or department that is writing a briefing book for the transition team on early childhood development. That's the opportunity. This field has an opportunity to really shape and inform. Let's complicate the thinking of whoever comes in. Help them understand and see and embrace this broader early childhood development frame. Help them see the connections that need to occur across the executive branch agencies and with the Department of Education to ensure that we're advancing in both policy and practice what a child needs to be ready for school and to be successful. And finally, let's help them identify the positions within the executive branch that can be influential in informing and driving a change agenda for all of our children. That's the opportunity, and everyone in this room has a different role to play, and First Fives are eager to be a part of the advocacy and policy effort to ensure that all children in California enter kindergarten ready to succeed in life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim and Chris and Bruce and Deborah and Sonia and Michael. Really, there's clearly no shortage of ideas. It's about policy for sure. It's about politics, but as Kim kind of mentioned at the end, it's about people. It's about making sure the right people in the right positions in the next governor's administration to really push on this whole child frame, which I really appreciate you brought that up. It's about prenatal through age 5, whole child perspective. So in some ways, it's about identifying the what, but also in some ways, it's about identifying the when. It's about sequencing and timing, and we can't do everything in year 1, but where do we want to be by year 8? And I think that gets to what we're going to do next, which is around this idea of polling. So I'll turn it over back to Chris to walk us through what's next.
Cool, I'm back to work. So everybody has one of these, I think, but in yellow on their tables. Hopefully in the last break, people signed up. If you type advanced proj or text advanced proj to 37607, you really need to watch the autocorrect. If you type in advanced pork, you can, I think, talk about steel tariffs on another line. So make sure you type advanced proj unless really you want to be at a steel tariffs conference and do that. I will say sometimes I've noticed people have to get on or off the Wi-Fi to do things faster with text messaging. So we'll give everybody 30 seconds to do that. Okay, well, hopefully those folks are ready. Some of us are faster texters than others, and hopefully that works. So you'll get a message that says you've joined Advancement Project's polling session. If you've got it, if you text them twice, you get the message twice, and so forth. So I think we're going to go to question number 1. Slide. And so basically, we're going to ask all you, and you're going to text in your answer. What should the next governor prioritize for the early care and education field? Choose one. I think if you try and vote multiple times, it'll actually are you sure you want to get rid of your first vote to do your second kind of thing? So you can only vote once. So we're seeing some people are doing it already. I should vote as well. Yeah. Yeah.
You keep raising that, Kim.
So as you can see, as more texts come in, the percentages will auto-update. And so right now we're seeing different ones up top. So we'll give folks another maybe 30 seconds to text. It's a single letter, but still.
Oh, there's somebody.
All right, well, I see we have some results. It looks like at the current pace, workforce, pay training and recruitment, looks like it's in first with 20%. Oh, yeah. Comprehensive data system for birth to 12th grade. I like that one, being a data person. Just second. Oh, now it's third. We're tied. We can keep going, but please do text because we'll have these all saved, and we can probably get these back to you in our follow-up emails. We'll all vote on while you were here. So the second question is, what challenges face the early care and education system? So this one is a word cloud question. So you can text whatever you want. You're not just choosing an option. So you can say, clearly, I guess, somebody texted. And you can type whatever you'd like. And the more people that type it, the word in the word cloud will get bigger and smaller and so forth kind of thing. So it looks like someone typed in data, compensation, funding. It doesn't matter the font on your phone. It all comes.
Yeah.
And again, watch your autocorrects on this. No filter. Wow. Wow. Funding keeps going. Now I see quality gain in font size. Cool, each one of these is a little picture. All right, maybe another 10 seconds. Single word or two.
Quality funding.
That quality and funding, compensation, all three. Okay, well, let's go to the third question. Again, we can email out the results of this. I believe the third question is, again, a locked response one. So who's in the room? Would you represent yourself as in the early care and education field, the K-12 field, both EC, K-12, and other? Someone at the check-in this morning was at the wrong conference, and we had So he insisted this was the right one, and he sat in here for a while, and he came out, and he's like, actually, this is the wrong one. So I guess the convention center is actually pretty close to here, and maybe some folks. But yes, so who's in the room? I should answer as well. Well, this is pretty good with the both K-12 and K-12 field. And in prior years, this was primarily a birth to 5, and we're expanding to birth to 12. So it looks like we're being successful, at least with audience draw so far, which I appreciate. Well, I'll just give another 10 seconds. Or less? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for voting. And I'll turn it back for analysis.
Thanks, Chris.
Fun.
What good information, and the word cloud too, I think that's so cool. And actually even the first question in the poll is really telling too. There's no one thing because it's a little bit of everything, because if you talk about quality, you're talking about the workforce. If you talk about quality, you're talking about compensation, and it all kind of feeds together. So it is difficult to try to prioritize all these issues in a new administration. Real quick though, before we kind of enter into a Q&A session, I forgot to mention, I think that all of you have 3x5 note cards on your tables. Someone from AP will be able to pick them up and hand them over to me. If you have a question, jot it down, bring it over here, and we'll get that asked. But the first question that I really wanted to ask, which is probably, it's a tricky question, but of all the tables we represent who are talking about policy, whose voice do you think is missing from the discussion? What are we missing? Because there's, like I said, there's no shortage of ideas, but who's missing? I don't know who could answer that question. Or are we good? Are we good? Do we have everybody? Bruce?
Just quickly say parents. And we're producing a set of videos of parents in childcare settings of friends, family, neighbors, and centers. It's very interesting how parents kind of see these issues as interlocking. We sort of parse them out, but parents actually faced with a bundle of quality, access, affordability, all at once.
And the priorities that parents are defining into the development of these policy agendas, and bring parents in as well as partners in advocacy. I know the first fives work very hard on our advocacy days to always be, bringing where we can the parent voice. They're interested in what we have to say, but they're really interested in what parents have to say. And that requires a lot of time and attention and training and support. It's a lot easier to say we need to bring parents into these conversations. It's another thing entirely to execute on that. But I think the first fives have some really good experience over the course of now 20 years. And are eager to bring that voice where possible and appropriate, both in terms of policy development as well as the actual advocacy with the next administration.
I would add to that, Peter, and ditto on the parents. I absolutely agree. I think another partner that I would like to see more of in all tables that we're talking about is the higher education community. I think we've done a good job at incorporating them more than what we used to, but I feel like we still work in silos. And while there's been progress made, feeling like we all get sucked into our vortex of the early ed, K-12, higher ed, and even workforce. And so having more of our higher education partners, especially when we talk about issues like workforce, are critical to these conversations.
This is not really somebody missing, but it's the way the policy conversations occur. Typically, the pre-K policy questions are completely independent from the K-12 policy conversations. It's one of the reasons why I'm so pleased to be here, because this is pre-K-12, which is quite unusual. So these are the same children who are moving from completely discrete, disconnected structures and programs. And there are many, many district people and others who have tried to create greater coherence, but it's extraordinarily difficult. So I'd like to see more policy conversations that really bring those folks together, so they're looking at the whole, not just the whole child at any given year, but the child's developmental pathway.
Can I make one other observation? Especially as we together develop and design and execute an approach that really embodies the whole child frame, a question I would ask for us is, how do we bring the children's health groups and voices into these early childhood development conversations? And as we evolve, and I mean, we've been a real leader nationally in terms of the implementation and embrace of the Affordable Care Act. We have really, truly should have universal coverage for all children, 0 to 5, regardless of their immigration status. The policy conversation is shifting from coverage to access. And again, if we're focusing on children in the earliest moments of their life, which means focusing on parents as well as child health, I think how to incorporate the children's health advocacy groups into these conversations, both on the policy and the advocacy side, is a missing piece or not fully developed quite yet.
Thank you, Kim. I wanted to follow up on that too, because that to me is a message to legislators as well. I think there, at least in my experience, there's been this sense of like, oh, we're good to go on kids being insured now, because we're nearing universal insurance coverage for kids, assuming the Affordable Care Act is safe. So how do you educate legislators to say, all right, next step, they're covered, but how do you fight against that notion to be just, oh, we're good to go?
It's about data. It's being aggressive. The point of early identification and intervention is a terrific example. 70% of delays are not being picked up until a child enters kindergarten. That is unacceptable. The Affordable Care Act ensures that every child is covered for timely and appropriate developmental screens and appropriate referrals. Overwhelmingly, pediatricians are not meeting that need. And so AB 11 was about holding physicians, holding plans, holding the Department of Healthcare Services accountable. And with data, with evidence, in partnership with a diverse coalition, the bill passed unanimously. I think it passed unanimously, right? Passed unanimously. Not one no vote. Yay! Bill was vetoed. Why? Governor said the bill's unnecessary. The Department of Healthcare Services has the authority to hold plans accountable, which gets you back to, well, why aren't you? So again, it's about data, it's about advocacy, it's about making the case and drawing the connections between child health and the school-related outcomes that elected officials are really focused on.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really great. I think that the three opposing agencies or advocates were the Department of Finance, the Department of Healthcare Services, and the California Right to Life Commission. Everyone else was in support. But it's telling, too, of that's what happens when you have a champion, I think, in the governor's office who gets this whole child focus.
Well, and even though the bill was vetoed, a lot of good progress was made in terms of elevating awareness and understanding, helping elected officials and others understand the connection between a child's school readiness and early identification and intervention, what the law actually covers, and engaging health plans in a very constructive, positive way. So more to come next year, and we'll probably lean into the issue a little bit more aggressively.
That's great. That's great.
So Pete, can I add one?
Oh, for sure.
One more group, which are demographers. When you look at the birth rates in several different counties around the state, looking at the big, expensive counties, the number of kids going down quite dramatically over the next years. You look at the housing prices, you look at counties that right now are under-resourced, becoming even more under-resourced as people move into those counties and the services aren't there. Everything from higher ed, there aren't the community colleges and the UCs and the CSUs in places like San Bernardino or some of those outlying counties, but that's where families are moving to. They're moving to in the south, they're moving to, San Bernardino, they're moving to Riverside, but they're moving out of LA. And when we do all of these discussions about what needs to be, we really need to take into account the fact that where are the children are going to be. It's very different than where they're
Really good point. My next question is really for Debra first, but I'm sure we'll all have opinions about this. But this is kind of a tricky question because us early childhood folks, we predicate and modify everything for quality. We always say quality this, quality that. But what, in your research, Debra, what is quality? What does that mean? It can mean a lot of different things, but what is quality? And why do we say it so often?
for so long.
There is a fair amount of research about what a quality program, what predicts positive child outcomes. We know, for example, that a sensitive caregiver is a critically important ingredient of a high quality program. The measures that we have of quality are not all that good. And so we don't have a whole lot of evidence based on quality measures that predict child outcomes. But I think the problem is not so much that what happens in the educational environment doesn't matter, it's that we're not measuring necessarily what matters. I'll give an example. We assess the quality of classrooms with the measure of the class typically. And then so we've got that quality measure. Then we assess children's skills and we focus on achievement outcomes. Well, class doesn't really measure either math or literacy teaching, but that's what we measure in child outcomes. So we actually have a dearth of good evidence that shows exactly what in a preschool environment or what in a daycare environment, childcare environment, predicts the best child outcomes. We do know, however, from small studies, what effective support for literacy learning is. We know what effective support for basic math understanding is. So I think what we need to do is really cull for now from those, that evidence and be very focused on the particular kinds of outcomes that we care about: social emotional development, self-regulation, math and literacy, basic understandings, and because all of these are highly predictive of success in school and in life. And we need to work toward developing better observation measures and better measures of quality that can help us grow the field and become clearer about what teachers need to know and be able to do, which can guide what our increased, more rigorous pre-service training and support for teachers needs to be. That was a typical researcher's response, which is, we need more research. But we do know quite a bit more than I actually see implemented in classrooms.
There you go. Great. So my next question is for Sonia. It's about the participation of businesses, because that's a voice that's missing a little bit from here in this room. But I was wondering, in your work with the LA Chamber, what do you find is the best argument to get business leaders involved in this, and what's the appropriate mechanism to message that to businesses?
Question. For the past 10 years, the messaging that we've used most is in order to have the 21st century workforce that we will need, and looking at data from PPIC that talk about the skills gap and the jobs that are not going to be filled in by 2025, using all that, I think has helped a bit. Here's a struggle. That for many business leaders, they're feeling like, okay, well, we're gonna think about this issue, but we're not gonna reap the benefits until 18 years down the line. And so we needed to take a step back and think about, okay, well, how can we make this a more urgent messaging? And so it wasn't hard to realize that we really needed to think about our current workforce, the critical need for quality childcare for our folks that are in the workforce on a day-to-day basis. And so I have to do a shout out to Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce, who I believe is working closely with First 5 Sonoma, fell in love with their adopted messaging, where they shifted a really tragic negative into a positive. With the recent fires that they experienced, Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce committed to working with the business community to open up more child cares, whether it was family child care providers, center-based, you name it. They all got impacted. 3 weeks after the fire, I believe it was, everyone's ready to go back to work. The problem is that the preschools are not open. The child care centers where we took our children are not open. And so that messaging was, we really need to rebuild thinking child care services for our babies and toddlers is critical. So as we rebuild corporations, as we rebuild our businesses, think about that being a focal point. So those are just some suggestions, and we really learned a lot from Santa Rosa and really applaud that work.
That's great. And actually that leads into a question that was asked from all of you about what are local examples, maybe like that we can learn from at a state level and help the new governor be like, look, this is going really well here. And maybe some of the work of local First Fives, learning from other local programs like Head Start. Any insights there?
I'd start from going back to my comments about having public policy at a local and state level acknowledge that learning begins before a child's even born. And that is just, it's a different frame. It's a broader frame around early learning. And I think our policymakers have been very slow in coming to appreciate the importance of family strengthening home visiting investments. And so yes, we're excited that there is, for the first time, an investment through the CalWORKs program in home visiting. And I think a big part of the case that was made to inform that was from the local First Fives experience. Almost every single county is advancing family resiliency, family strengthening as a priority, and is demonstrating the power of home visiting programs across family functioning indicators, child and maternal health, and school readiness. So again, if we bring that broader frame of what it takes for a child to be ready to be successful in school, we got to go all the way back before a child's even born. So I'm excited to hear BRC, the Blue Ribbon Commission, talking about targeted universalism. We would like to bring a similar frame to those types of family strengthening investments, such as we're doing in LA, where in our 14 communities where we're working, every child, every family is offered voluntary enrollment. And we believe by doing so, we are seeing more at-risk families be willing to sign up and participate, because the expectation is everyone can benefit. Everyone can benefit, and that's the community norm we're trying to create.
But also to think about comparing to other countries, every other country, including some very poor countries, have parental leave, and sometimes a year or even more than a year. So I think when we compare ourselves to most other countries, parental leave jumps out, as well as all the other supports and resources that are provided to families of young children.
So we, for many years, have looked at the number of families that we're serving who are receiving a child care subsidy, and we look to see how much those families are earning while they work. And we find that the dollars are just about $2.50 for every dollar that's invested in a subsidy. We're not even talking about quality, we're just talking about somebody working. We also know that we have a 30,000 family wait list. And that when we talk about needing $1 billion more, last year it was $1 billion for babies, that doesn't even come close to the number of families that need care. And you know, we just got a little bit more money with the Child Care Development Block Grant money coming to the state, which allowed us to add a few more families. And so we go and we very quietly advertise that we have some openings, and we get lines around the block. There is a desperation out there just to have somewhere for your child to be during the day or in the evening or on the weekends, so that you can go out and work. And economic security and stability is probably the #1 predictor of children doing better. It's not just about the educational systems that we have, but it's about parents being able to earn income that allows them to live and not be homeless and all those things. So I think we have to look at this from at least two lenses, one of which is making sure that we support children and families who are needing to work, and make sure that those environments that they're in are good environments for them. So you can't just look at one or the other, you have to look at both.
Great.
Matt, can I just add one thing to the quality issue that I was asked before? The one thing we know for sure is that caregivers who are stressed out and dealing with the challenges of poverty have mental health problems, depression, and other sorts of things that we know undermine their ability to provide good care for children. Right. So I just wanted to add that. We don't always know exactly what's right, but we do know some things that are definitely not right.
And frequently, those same folks are providers themselves, because and what percentage is it of early childhood workforce who are also receiving public benefits? It's more than...
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
We know that the people who are providing care for our children are many of them are living in poverty and dealing with the stress and mental health problems that brings. That is not good for children.
Agreed. So the next couple questions, because we've got time for maybe two more, and I want to go down the...
Got to sign it, it says stop.
I'm not done yet. And RSLU would be the timekeeper, yeah. I want to go down the line really quick and just ask you, if the next governor came to you and said, all right, I'm ready, I'm a champion, I'm ready to go, what should we do first? That's a hard question, but what would you say? What are some low-hanging fruits, and what do you think are early wins potentially in a new administration?
So you want the earliest low-term, low-hanging fruit. Okay. So my lowest hanging fruit is that the federal government rebenched Child Care Development Block Grant. California should get another $260 million for that. And the state Department of Finance in the budget this year made this additional money a one-time and spread it out over 4 years. And now that the state has getting this 260 on a regular basis, DOF needs to rebench, and we need to spend that money on early childhood and take the 4 years and turn it back into 2 years and assume that we're getting this yearly money. That's the easiest thing you could do.
I don't know that I would say this is low-hanging fruit, but hey, we have to think North Star. I think for me, if that question came up, I would really focus on the workforce. When we're talking about really supporting our folks that are caring for our youngest, thinking about professional development, thinking about training, thinking about compensation. That's really what it comes down to. I'd really also push and say, if we want to see a future workforce that is interested in this field, we need to fix what we currently have right now. Otherwise, we're not going to see folks being attracted to this critical field that is so important to our region, to our state, to families, to our social well-being. So yeah, not a low-hanging fruit. I think it will take time, but I would focus on the workforce and the workforce component.
Ditto on the workforce, and not just because you applauded. I want to add a general principle which doesn't have a specific policy attached to it, which is don't compromise quality to expand access, because expanding access to programs that are not of high quality will not serve our children in the way that we all want to.
I disagree with that slightly. I think the new and additional research should be at Berkeley, actually, not at.
We have a long history of this.
I think the governor is going to need a couple early wins, and I think Michael mentioned the enrollment decline and the declining child population. I think he could shore that up by extending TK to all 4-year-olds from low-income families, and do that in a couple years, and use Prop 98 money to conserve so that we can fund some of what Kim is advocating for infants and toddlers. Chris?
I'll say when we took our maps around to the different counties, providers, people on the ground kept saying over and over, facilities, there really aren't the facilities, especially for infant toddlers, really in low income or highest need communities. But I think that's a great place to start. And then, of course, being a researcher, I'll say data as well, more data.
I'll take a somewhat different tact, and I'll go back to my comment about the transition. There's a saying, to lead is to choose, and how the next administration chooses to organize structure and staff as administration will have a bearing on everything we're talking about. So education, as we know, is very complex, bifurcated in terms of governance. And that's also true within the in terms of CDE and the school board and the governor. It's also true within the executive branch. So some governors have chosen to set up offices of education, offices of child development and education. It would be an office of early learning and education. But how a new administration structures their government, the people who are named and the charge they are given has really profound implications. Because what governors care about matters. Everyone has to care when a governor cares about something. Even if you really don't like it, you're caring about it in a more negative way than a positive way. So who the governor appoints to, what positions he might create, who he appoints, and the charge he gives will be profoundly important. Because so much of this work crosses multiple departments and agencies. And having a governor who's committed to connecting those dots in policy and practice in furtherance of kids getting the support they need along that continuum is going to be absolutely critical. Otherwise, it continues to be a little bit here, a little bit there. So I'd go with governance.
Great. Well, I think that is about it in time. The only thing that I will wrap up this great discussion, and feel free to find me, and I'm sorry, I'm going to volunteer all of you as well to talk, because I didn't get nearly through all the great questions that all of you had. But it's really hard work, and I'm so excited, though, that we have such great minds working on it and a potential new governor to be a champion of all of it. I was reading this morning, it was maybe published a few days ago, but it was an article, an opinion piece by Dan Walters in Cal Matters, talking about how the financial future of California schools looks very bleak. And I think it's fair in some ways to think that there's bleakness everywhere. You just watched what happened last week in Washington, D.C. and can't help but feel deflated. And even locally, what's deflated? Everything's a crisis. There's a housing crisis. There's a pension crisis. There's an early childhood crisis. And I am, though, so encouraged because you're in the room today because you don't believe that, and you are optimistic about the future, as are we, I think, on this stage. And please, all I can say is continue to be involved, continue to push the new governor, because kids need a lobby, and kids need champions in every part of government, but also outside of government, to really push on that person to make sure that he follows through and does something big for our kids. So really, it's a call to all of you to keep involved, keep carrying the torch, and with it, we can do it. We can all do it together. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.